C.J. Grisham.
Yes, sir. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. Chairman Estes, members of the committee.
Let me interrupt you in a minute. And I commented that both Republican and Democratic gubernatorial candidates are endorsing some sort of open carry, so I took the liberty of sending them some of your material.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
My name is C.J. Grisham. I am a father of 3. I'm also a scout leader. I'm also an active duty master sergeant in the United States Army stationed at Fort Hood. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak about this very important topic. As you know, this hearing comes less than a week after the recent shooting at Fort Hood, in which a disgruntled soldier armed himself with a .45 caliber handgun and shot 19 of his fellow troops before turning the gun on himself. I'd like to take a quick moment to talk about that day because I was there. At about 4:30 p.m., I had just let my soldiers go home for the day a little bit early. Shortly after that, while I was closing up my shop, I heard the big voice booming over the post-wide loudspeakers. The big voice, as we call it, is our notification system when there's an emergency on Fort Hood. Similar to tornado sirens that you may have heard in your towns, the big voice tells us if there's a weather or terrorist type emergency. When the first siren went off, I thought it was a test because of the late hour, and the weather was sunny and breezy, so it couldn't have been that. I moved closer to the window to listen to the message as it was repeated. Take shelter, take shelter, take shelter. Lock your doors and windows. Turn off your ventilation systems, heaters, and air conditioners. Take shelter, take shelter, take shelter. I heard this over and over again. I immediately began the process of getting accountability of my soldiers to make sure that they were safe and not affected. I had no idea where the shooting was taking place since the big voice doesn't give specifics. Everyone had ducked into the closest building near them, and the post was put on lockdown. I then got a text from a buddy next to where the shooting was happening telling me that his troops were trying to escape by jumping over a fence to get away. Soldiers running away from gunfire. Senator, soldiers aren't trained to run away from gunfire. We're trained to run towards gunfire. It is a shame when the very people who are trained to take out an armed attacker are unable to take out an armed attacker. My soldiers and I didn't know whether or not we had just locked ourselves in a building with a shooter. What if the people in our building, or one of the people in the building, was the shooter? As it happened in November 2009, when Major Nidal Hassan mowed down 30 soldiers unopposed because Fort Hood is a so-called gun-free zone. I've never felt more helpless in my life, and I was nowhere near the shooter. I felt no more safe or able to protect my soldiers that day than my fellow Texan Susanna Huff felt the day her parents were murdered 13 years ago. Have we learned nothing? When you disarm law-abiding citizens, you empower criminals, whether on the largest military installation in the country or the smallest convenience store in Texas. In 2012, after returning from Afghanistan, I took my family on vacation to visit several national parks in the Northwest. It was the best vacation of my life. We visited Yellowstone, Yosemite, Arches, and the Garden of the Gods national parks. We went through 7 different states over the course of our 2-week vacation, and every single one of them I was able to carry my sidearm openly or concealed. Yet when I returned home to the greatest state of them all, I had to hide my pistol as if I was ashamed of it. In 7 different states, what I was doing was perfectly legal and acceptable, but that same act, had I done it here, made me a criminal. Right now in America, 45 states allow some form of open carry, whether licensed or unlicensed. Of those 45, 30 are unlicensed open carry. Of those 30, 5 recognize the constitutional right to carry open and concealed without a license. So it begs the question in Texas, why are we one of 5 states that doesn't recognize a simple principle that our forefathers enshrined in our Constitution, that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed? In fact, Texas laws against open carry put our gun rights on par with anti-gun states like Illinois, California, New York, as well as the District of Columbia. Is the home of the Alamo and Gonzales really content with being associated gun-wise with states from which people are flocking in droves because of their gun laws, only to be confronted with the reality that we aren't as gun-friendly as our reputation would suggest? As the current law stands, If you can afford to pay the steep Texas tax on Second Amendment rights, then you have to walk on eggshells to keep your permit. The rules are oppressive against those that jump through the hoops for permission to defend themselves with a firearm. And God forbid you get charged with a Class B misdemeanor or higher while carrying a CHL. The moment you are merely accused of a Class B misdemeanor, your license is suspended. When you're convicted of a Class B misdemeanor, you lose your CHL for 5 years. Why do I say that? Well, what is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas? Highway racing, graffiti, using someone else's computer without their permission, disrupting a gathering through a verbal utterance, burning the Texas or American flag, getting a body piercing when you're under the influence of alcohol, tossing a lit cigarette on the road, burning the serial or removing the serial number from your boat, or blocking a sidewalk. All of these will cause you to lose your gun rights in Texas. These are just a few of the thousands of Class B misdemeanors. Not a single example I listed above is a crime involving guns, violence, threats, or intimidation. Yet every single one of them will prevent you from exercising your right to keep and bear arms in Texas, because when you lose your ability to lawfully carry a concealed handgun, you lose your ability to carry a handgun, period. Once you lose your CHL, or if you don't get a CHL, the only self-defense option you have is to carry a rifle or shotgun. If you're 18 to 20, you don't even have the option of asking to get a CHL, so your only option of self-defense is a rifle or shotgun. Last year, on a windy day in March, my son Chris and I set out in the process of earning his hiking merit badge. It was the only merit badge he needed to earn his Eagle Scout rank. The badge required that scouts complete 5 10-mile hikes and 2 25-mile hikes. Chris planned the route to begin and end at our home out in rural Temple, Texas. Because we live out in the country and we're surrounded by pastures and fields, I always carry a rifle or shotgun on me to deal with the wildlife that may be a threat to me or my family. The rest, shall we say, is history. Halfway through the hike, I was approached by a police officer who attempted to take my firearm without cause. I was breaking no law and harming no one. I wasn't carrying my firearm in a populated area or a sensitive area. I wasn't pointing at anyone or threatening at anyone. Yet I was arrested because I refused to voluntarily surrender my firearm when I wasn't breaking any laws. For the first time in my life, I was thrown in jail and had to pay a $2,500 fine or a bail just to earn my freedom. My case is currently under appeal, but this experience taught me something. It taught me that law enforcement and the general public were ignorant about Texas gun laws and guns in general. I've never broken a law before, and I never considered myself an activist until this moment. I've always been an advocate of gun rights, but this incident changed everything. I recognized that merely writing about gun rights wasn't getting us any closer to achieving gun rights. That's why I started the educational nonprofit Open Carry Texas, and our 501c3 status is pending right now. I started in July of last year. Our mission statement is fourfold. First, to educate Texans on the lawful carry openly of firearms. Second is to condition Texans to feel comfortable around the sight of firearms, and this is something that was brought up by committee members in previous questions. Third was to try and get legislation passed that recognized less restrictive gun rights. And finally, and most importantly, we want to foster a positive relationship with law enforcement to minimize these negative encounters that have happened around the state. My goal is simple. I wanted to ensure that no one ever had to endure what my son and I went through that day. Over the past 8 months, OCT has grown to over 12,000 members from every part of Texas. We've branched out into 34 local groups. We've conducted over 400 walks and rallies with tens of thousands of people participating. We span from El Paso to Beaumont, Harlingen to Amarillo, and all points in between. Everywhere we go, we make a concerted effort to be civil, kind, cordial, and approachable to the greatest extent possible. We want people to approach us and ask questions, which they do. When a private business allows us to enter their establishment, we are mindful that everyone is not comfortable around guns. We work hard to help them feel at ease. We smile, we converse, we eat, we pay, and we leave. Make no mistake, our laws are broken. It may come as a surprise to you that some people aren't used to seeing firearms, or it's probably not a surprise to you that some people aren't used to seeing firearms in their towns or neighborhoods and only know what the media wants them to know. Understandably, some of these people will call police and say that they're scared or alarmed. We understand that. We expect that. In fact, one of the anti-gun hoplophobic groups testifying today, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, actually tell their members that if they see one of our members in public, to call the police and tell them they're alarmed. We talk about this relationship between law enforcement and the public. When law enforcement are responding to a call about something that isn't a fact, that creates a very tense situation for everybody involved. It's very dangerous. But yet Moms Demand Action tell their members to do that. They're trying to use the law against us, even though the law at least appears to obviously state that the violation isn't a result of how someone feels around the sight of a gun, but the intent with which the person is carrying the gun. And the problem with our laws in Texas, as that would appear, at least on its face, is that many of them violate our own state constitution. Section 23 states, "Every citizen shall have the right to keep and bear arms in the lawful defense of himself or the state, but the legislature shall have power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime," not with a view to prevent people from being offended. So in order to continue banning the open carry of pistols, members of this committee and the legislature as a whole must prove that banning the practice prevents crime in order for it to be constitutional. A recent story.
CJ, how you doing there? Are we going to get the whole load, or?
No, I'm actually going to skip a lot of this. I just want to touch on two things, actually. I was going to skip right through this.
Thank you.
And get straight to open
By the
carry.
way, let me just comment. I saw the video of your arrest, and I want to commend you for your calmness in a very tense situation. And it was, in my opinion, a horrible situation, but it could have escalated and gotten out of control a whole lot more than it did. And
it's a day I'll never forget, Senator.
well, it was distressing to everybody concerned, I know. But anyway, go ahead.
I just want to address I wanted to address some of the questions you had before. The Washington Times, according to them, the murder rate for the first quarter of this year has been the lowest it's ever been in 50 years, thanks to the new concealed carry law passed in Illinois. In the first 3 months, homicides dropped to the fewest ever since 1958. Since Arizona passed its constitutional carry bill, meaning no license for open carry or unlicensed carry, the very next year, crime dropped 5%. Since that law has been passed, it's dropped 38.6%, 36.8%. Excuse me, had that backwards. Okay. Reported rapes were down, robberies declined, even motor vehicle theft was down 23%. Researcher Gary Kleck found that 92% of criminal attacks were deterred when a gun was merely shown. And Murdoch, I'm not going to give you the case law. I'll give this to you guys later. That's all boring stuff.
Well, listen, you can give us written testimony. It goes into the record.
Okay, I can just give this to you then, yes, Senator. And what I'll do is I will just close and say Open Carry Texas is at the forefront in proving that there is nothing to fear and allowing our citizens to freely open carry their firearms. We are doing that now, and nobody's getting hurt. There's no threat or menace to society in allowing the open carry of firearms. There's no risk and no logical proven reason to continue the ban put in place as a result of the Jim Crow laws in the late 19th century. There's never been a better time than now. We have proven to the state of Texas that if people can not be threatened by the open carry of long arms, they're not going to be threatened by the open carry of pistols. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. And I also want to make the comment, and you know, it would be very easy for us as members of the legislature to interject our views as to what happened at Fort Hood, and we're not going to do that. You know, the military can figure that out. You made some good points there, but we do. You know, two tragedies there is way too many, and we just thank you for your service to the country, and we just hope the Fort Hood family rallies together and
Texas has really supported our community, and we appreciate that.
We appreciate you. Are there any questions for CJ? Senators? No? Any questions?
Just
Senator Hinojosa.
I guess, you know, I'm Marine Corps Vietnam veteran, so I'm pretty familiar with guns and rifles. And I do have a license to carry a concealed weapon. And one of the things I always somewhat ponder, I mean, what would I do in a situation, for example, that called for an armed citizen come to the defense of victims who are unarmed and getting hurt. And I don't know the answer, but I guess if police were to show up, they might mistake me for the criminal instead of being the law-abiding citizen. When you have open carry, don't you think there would be a higher risk for law enforcement who respond to certain situations, be more in
That's a great question, Senator, and thank you also for your service. It's because of men like you that I'm able to still serve such a great country, so I appreciate that. But I guess I can just go back to fact. There's absolutely no data out there that says that the open carry of firearms makes you any more or less susceptible of being shot. I actually give our law enforcement a lot of credit. I believe that they're highly trained, and when they arrive on the scene, it's not that difficult to find out who the bad guy is. Either he's dead or he's probably shooting at the police officer. Generally, the good guys are going to be firing with the police officers, if that even comes to it. But these kinds of things, generally by the time the police arrive, there's already a dead body or the person's gotten away. So there's, usually what we will do, most gun owners, is once the threat is gone, you reholster your weapon. You don't just keep it out there and keep waving it around so when the police get there, they don't know who the criminal is.
Keep in mind that, of course, you had an unfortunate situation, but many times you have also police brutality or police abuses. But those are the exception and not necessarily the rule. So we cannot, I guess, sort of indict all law enforcement because you have some that maybe misinterpret the law or enforce the law incorrectly. And I guess what you're advocating is that as an example of your Second Amendment rights being violated. And to me, the way I read the Second Amendment, while yes, we have the right to bear arms, I think government can set some parameters in terms of public policy. You don't agree with that?
To a degree, I do, Senator. But for the most part, I believe if there's no crime, or if there's no victim, there's no crime. That's a basic tenet of our law. And our law is very specific that in order to regulate the wearing of firearms, it must be with a view to prevent crime. And, as it relates to law enforcement, yes, we have had several incidents around the state. Thankfully, they only constitute about 1 or 2% of the engagements that we've had. Generally, law enforcement are very supportive of what we do. They understand what we do. We have proven that we're not a threat. We're very respectful. Hillary talked about in San Antonio yesterday, us protesting the police. We weren't protesting the police. We were protesting the actions of a police officer. I actually sat down with Captain Guzman on the West Substation of San Antonio Police prior to our event, just before. We sat down for about a half an hour, explained what we were going to do. We had a very cordial conversation. We had our event, and then I went back inside the substation and spoke with Captain Guzman again, and we had a great conversation. I've spoken with Chief McManus about this issue. Anytime we have an issue where we feel that our rights are violated, we have a rally in support of that individual and against the actions of the police officer, not the police officer himself. And we support our law enforcement. They've got a difficult job to do. And that's why we try to work with them. But we're also not going to stand by and allow our rights to be violated without at least responding to it in a peaceful manner.
One of the things when you talk about there's no victim, there's no crime, we do pass a lot of, unfortunately, criminal statutes without any type of intent required. This become a big issue nationwide. And a lot of people get arrested for making a mistake and violating some statute they didn't know anything about. But getting back to the open carry, to me, I guess it's kind of hard to believe that we're going back to the Wild West so we can walk anywhere downtown, with our guns strapped on us and, ready for action. And it's just...
Senator,
I guess just a different in terms of
history. The Wild West is an image of movies. Back in the 1800s, people weren't going out shooting everybody and having these gunfights at the OK Corral. The reason that we know about the OK Corral and the reason we know about things like Newtown is because they're not regular events. They're not everyday events. These are things that happened and became a part of history. As a matter of fact, the fact that there were so many openly carried people in the Wild West is why there weren't as many crimes as there were. Texas was a relatively safe state until we passed these Reconstructionist laws that banned guns, because once we started cracking down on these things, all the gangs and everything were able to just run around unfettered. But we, the idea that just because we're going to carry an open firearm, we're going to act any differently than we carry a concealed firearm is just kind of a weird idea to me. It's kind of a weird mentality, because all that's separating me from carrying a concealed firearm and an open firearm is this little piece of cloth right here. There's no difference. I'm not going to act any different with an open firearm than I am a concealed firearm. But like right now, if this is how I dress and I've got a tucked in shirt, I have no way to carry a concealed firearm unless I carry a little itty bitty pea shooter that may just irritate my attacker. So I can't carry an effective firearm while I'm in like a business suit, or whether during the summertime. As a matter of fact, our laws unfairly discriminate against women, because the only option that most women have is to put a gun in their purse, because they're wearing a dress, or generally women wear tighter clothing. And what happens when that purse is stolen? Not only does the criminal now have a gun, but the female is unarmed.
You don't think that if you have open carry, that person might be more inclined to use that weapon?
No, not at all. No, sir. Again, we've already got the weapon. Open carry, it doesn't make our mindset any less or more different than carrying a concealed weapon. We carry firearms every day around the state with AR-15s, those dangerous, evil black weapons. And I've gotten in plenty of discussions with people who absolutely abhor what I'm doing, and I've never once thought about shooting them in the head.
Keep it that way. Any other questions for CJ? Thank you so much for being here. And again, we do express our sympathies towards the Fort Hood family.
Thank you, sir.